Hello and welcome to another ATP. I didn't know where to look then. Another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce, and my guest James from Why Ukraine, and we'll show his YouTube channel in a wee while. I put the feelers out. I was like, it's been a busy Saturday. I have to go and watch my boy play. I want to go and watch my boy play football and sports stuff and family, and I need to do my Frontline update. But actually, sometimes it's quicker to do it as a live. Although I end up talking for longer on a live. So I sent out a few feelers. Matt Bishop is in Australia. It's very late there. James is up for it. So here we are with James. So really appreciate that. Already, Brian on, can I just say, sorry, before James gets a go at it. Brian Ivy, we were just talking about politics a little bit, but in the green room, James and myself. So Brian says, and he's such a great supporter of the channel, since immigration is such a big issue in the US and Great Britain, might be time for a moral question to be debated. What is more important, the survival of culture and way of life, or saving all by open borders? Right, now this is my kind of, this is philosophy, my friend. And that is, so yeah. I probably won't discuss that one today, Brian, but there is a real interesting discussion about what borders are. Borders are just arbitrary lines drawn in the sands. And I have talked about this before, about they are accidents of geography and history, and they are just agreements by consensus. And so when international institutions agree on borders, they write maps and everyone supposedly agrees with that, but not everyone does agree with it. And it's not objective fact. It is only a fact as much as it is agreed upon by everyone or by consensus. So for example, China has just rewritten the maps with regard to having a little bit of, taking a little bit of India and taking a little bit of Russia. And like, who gets to, it's just agreed on by might then, or at least it's obtained by might. And this is what's going on with Ukraine, which is another nation is attacking this country, and if this country is fully taken over by the invading force, if that's the case, for the long term, then that will become the borders of the new country, and then it might not be agreed upon by everyone, but eventually it will become the de facto map. So borders are not objective. Anyway, sorry, I haven't even let James say anything, and Brian's got me going off on one.
I think that the question that was posed by your viewer, I mean, it's a reasonable question, but it's based on a false premise, I think. And Brian Ivy, I mean, I think it's a good question, but it's based on a false dichotomy. I believe that properly managed, properly handled, you can have both open borders and survival of your culture and way of life. I think that's entirely possible. It's just about how it's managed. It comes down to the nitty-gritty details.
It's interesting. So if you are a libertarian, a political libertarian, I split libertarians into like libertarians and what I call faux libertarians. Faux libertarians are like these false libertarians who claim they're libertarian, but actually when it comes to things like whether you can have an abortion or whether you can have free movement of people, they're like, no. I was like, okay, so you're not really. So if you look at the Libertarian Party of the US, like the political manifesto of the Libertarian Party, they believe in free movement of people because you have to, because it's like literally the most basic human freedom is the ability to move from A to B, no matter where A and B are. And so proper libertarians are broadly for free movement of people. So it depends where you sit in a political spectrum, but also, it's such a massive question and people get so angry about immigration. Brian, I will do that. That is a good discussion because my views have actually changed in line with philosophy. So but anyway, I won't go down that route. Anyway, James from Why
Ukraine? That's the channel.
Yep. I might need to change the thumbnail because I put why in Ukraine. Why Ukraine? American in Ukraine. Anyway, you guys understand. James, what have you been up to? You came on last time and helped out. Thank you for that. And you've done some, I think, some fundraising for a veteran that wants to get back out to Ukraine, and that has been successful. Tell us about it.
Super excited. On our live stream every Sunday, we're doing a fundraising for one of you can see his picture right there where it says "Help Tony Get Back." That's the live stream. So that's from last week. So he's an American veteran of Ukraine. He fought in Ukraine for 4 months. I was with him in the barracks International Legion, and he had to go back for some family stuff, and now his unit wants him back, and he wants to go back, but he didn't have enough money to get back, so we raised up that money, and I just got word that we've got enough to cover his travel expenses.
That's amazing. So that's really cool. And please go and check out American and Ukraine, Why Ukraine. Please, last time James was on, he got a little boost in numbers of subscribers. And it's great if that can happen. Let's keep this kind of community afloat and vibrant. And you guys are such a wonderful bunch of people.
Thank you, everyone.
I'd love to share you. So today we're going to have a quick... I always say quick, but you know me. A quick romp through the map of Ukraine, and we'll look at the front lines as I normally do, and James will help me with that. And then we'll have some sidebars, things to talk about. He's been in contact with people he may give us some insight into what's going on. And actually, before we start, one thing I did want to speak to James about was he lives in Zakarpattia at the moment. So for those who didn't see the last live stream, James lives in this area that's on the Hungarian border. That is where are you?
There you go, Beregova. And that's literally less than 2 hours from where this attack happened, the suicide bomber. With the grenades.
In my news piece, I think it was this morning. Goodness me, every day merge into each other. But I showed you a guy walking into a village council meeting where they were discussing, I believe, defense issues, and he took a couple of hand grenades out of his pockets and just threw them on the floor and blew up the room. And amazingly, I don't think anyone was killed outright. I don't think he's in a particularly good way. He might have, I don't know if he's died, but it seems pretty amazing that there were so many people packed in, but there will be some terribly injured people. So tell me what happened. What do you understand?
Well, it's such a crazy shock because nothing like this has happened in this part of Ukraine in 100 years, So no, I mean, everybody is in shock. That I know of. We're just like, what the... I mean, he was obviously well known to these people. So if you want to kind of get an idea, you see where it says Beregova, and if you draw a line, about 45-degree line from Beregova to the right hand side, if you zoom in, that's where the city is. Karemsi. Yeah. So close to Irshava there, between Irshava and Mukachevo. You go up there, you go right about there.
Right, and so that's where it happened.
It's somewhere in there. Anyway, I may be off on my map on that, but it's close enough that it's less than a 2-hour drive from where I am now, and it's really, really why it's up, and it happened. I'm sorry, I was a little bit off there. It's actually more up in the mountains. So if you look at that highway now, go to your right a little more and up in the mountains. There's another road up here. You have to go. The next one over these big mountains. Anyway, past the national park. It's in the middle of. We would say it's in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. Oh yeah, there it is. Karetsky. That's it, right there. There we go. That's the one. Karetsky. And it's it's a little town. It's not big. This is talking about this with Ukrainians. I was talking this week with a couple of my students, one of whom is in Poland, and he said, he's afraid of what happens after the war when there's going to be these guys running around with guns and grenades and things. Do we have proper controls in place? He said, or is it going to be like America?
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think that, that's a challenge that's yet to be properly looked at because, take one issue at a time. But given that there will be this whole suite of weaponry inside Ukraine, what happens in peacetime, what happens after the war? And there have to be some very, because on the one hand, you're thinking will Russia stand up again? It depends how it all ends, but they will have to think really long and hard about how to collect all that weaponry up, and there's going to be so many bits and pieces flying around that country. But yeah, definitely. So it's just sad that something like that has to happen, and it is. I presume there was some talk about.
We'll find out. Things will come out.
Yeah, some talk about him being accused of corruption himself or something, and Anyway, so that happened. That's in your neck of the woods, right? We're going to go to the northeastern sector. Meanwhile, there is lots going on in a live stream, and by the way, I think there's a chap that is fighting to the south of Bakhmut, I believe.
I was missing all the chats. Sorry. Now I see. Great.
Right, and Jonathan, he says Jonathan, the Ukrainian soldiers use human shields are from the 5th Brigade. They caught them when getting the hills, so that's the hills behind Klishivka, I would have thought. So, that's really sad news.
I saw that video too. It just shows you how low they'll sink.
Yes, yeah. So. Let's go to just before we go to that front line, I wanted to discuss this and see what you thought, James. So this is exactly what I've been saying over the last week. So that I feel quite validated in a sense, but on the other hand, if I was to argue from a Russian point of view, I would say this looks like making excuses, or this looks like it could be what's called a post hoc rationalization, which is making reasoning after the fact. So the claim is, and I agree with this, Ukrainian armed forces do not consider a priority to retake territory and defend the current front line. At the moment, the main goal of the Ukrainian armed forces is to minimize losses. The German publication Bild has quoted sources in the Ukrainian army as saying. Now, Bild is a tabloid newspaper. Take that with a pinch of salt. However, I do agree with this. I have said, and you've heard me say this over the last few weeks, don't worry about the Ukrainians losing territory all along this front line. They might lose as much as they gained in the counteroffensive, and it might happen quite quickly, or it might not, or whatever. Territory is, so if you're talking about the goals of this whole project for the Ukrainians, it is, of course, to take territory back. And I'm going to go back to talk about this hierarchy of needs, if you like, a hierarchy of goals. At the top, you have take all your territory back. But before you get there, you absolutely need to achieve these other things, which is 1, complete degradation of Russian mechanized equipment. 2, a degradation of the Russian personnel, so attrition of the personnel. 3, degradation of Russian logistics. 4, you need to maintain your troops' lives, and you need to mobilize more troops. And we can talk about all of these other objectives that are more pressing than the overall objective of taking land. The taking land part is almost the last bit of the jigsaw, and that happens when everything else is in place. And so for this to now be announced by a fairly major news source here, or at least the Bild claiming this, is I think it's sensible to get that messaging out there, but so you're managing people's expectations. But it's not about saying, we need to come up with an excuse as to why we are losing land. It's just that actually the land doesn't win the war, in a sense. Like, the land can have an impact on maneuvers, of course, but what's going to win the war is having the right weapons and the right amount of people. So you have to have the right weapons and the right amount of people, and the other side needs to be attrited to the sufficient level such that you can move and take land. Is that something you would agree with, James?
Yeah, I think that there may be a slight misreading of that sentence, and maybe a mistranslation that Nexta, this tabloid, and it says they're not going to take, they're not focusing on taking back territory and defend their ground. The way you could read that makes it sound like they don't care about either one.
Yeah,
because what they left out I don't know, some part of speech there where they should have said and only, or and just are just defending the ground. And I mean, if you think about it, it makes sense under the circumstances. We've got this tiny trickle of funding coming in from the United States federal government. You've got funding getting blocked at the EU level by Orban. How can the Ukrainian military make plans for invasion or plans for the future under those circumstances? Obviously the only thing they can do is just try to hold on, because they don't know how much they're going to be getting in the future. $300 million under the NDAA, that's not much,
Yes, exactly. So it's very difficult to plan when you don't have a knowledge about what's coming later down the line, and it's very difficult to commit some of your best tanks if you don't know if you're going to get replacements for those tanks, so on and so forth, all the things we talked about before. But I think it is important not to get too disheartened. This will be a period where the Russians should take land because they're going on the offensive, and the Ukrainians are going to be thinking, how can they trick the Russians without taking too many casualties themselves? And that will be one of the metrics for the success for the Ukrainians in the next few months before they next have a pop at the Russians. All the while, they might still be having the odd area like Krinky where they are on the offensive. Right, if we go to the map, the northeastern sector shows no control changes from Kupiansk to Svatova to Crimea. And if we look at the ISW, they say that the Russian MOD has claimed that Russian forces repelled 27 Ukrainian attacks in the Kupiansk direction in the past week. So they are claiming that Ukrainians are pushing quite a lot back. But actually, the general consensus is that the Russians are pushing quite hard in Kupiansk at the moment. Indeed, to the point where Kyiv Independent reports that Russia is committing more reserves in an attempt to capture Kupiansk, that being the town itself. This is an important hub of logistics. As you can see, the roads there's rail links through there. There's also the Oskil River coming down here, which is important. So that is an important objective for the Russians, and Kyiv Independent implying that that's one of their top priorities. PS11, another source says, after the unsuccessful assault near Sinkivka, so we saw columns of vehicles attack Sinkivka from the Russians, and they did lose quite a lot of kit around there by all accounts. The Russians decided to send another assault group, but this time just infantry without the support of armored vehicles, and apparently they're afraid of losing a couple more units. As a result, the group was destroyed by our artillery on the approach to the village. So there's more video evidence of things not going too well for the Russians in that area. However, they are pressing, and they have had success north of Sinkivka, and they have had success, a bit of back and forth around your hidden area. I think I think it's going to be tough here over the winter period, and I think the Russians are probably going to treat this as a fairly major objective for them. If they can take Sinkivka, then they'd be able to have something to send back to Putin to say, look, you can get elected now as a president for the 15th millionth time because we've taken Sinkivka, and so that's my thoughts about Northeast. Anything to say, James?
I mean, it's just I understand why they're here. I have friends there in the Kupiansk area, let's say, I without giving too much away, but they are in direct and immediate danger, and I mean, it makes sense that you've got the logistics coming down from Russia, and they're going to continue to pound away at Kupiansk over and over and over. This it just shows you that Russia they have maybe not realized, but they are unable to accomplish very much in other directions. So they're like, okay, well, let's try it up here. So then both sides are trying to pull the opposite side's reinforcements to one opposite side of the chessboard, as it were, and then they want to attack on the opposite side. So I'm sure the Russians are thinking, we're gonna get the Ukrainians to send a bunch of reinforcements to Kupiansk, and then we will wipe them out in Krinky. I'm sure that's the logic, and it just goes back and forth and back and forth.
Yes. Sorry, I'm just slightly but pausing at the moment because there's someone that I asked whether they want to come on live. Someone that was in the Slovenian army and has sort of NATO contacts and whatnot. But he's just messaged me back to say he can come on in sort of 20 minutes. I'm like, oh no, I'm live now. But thank you very much. So the Northeast is somewhere where there's increased activity. We've seen, lots of stuff going on in the Kupiansk area, and as mentioned, the Ivaniska area, although not as much as previously. Further down towards Svatova, where we've got Stelmakivka, Kuzmivka, Novoselivska, we've got Ryarodka and the Novoherivka area. There's no change there. That was an area where the Russians were trying to take and moving towards Borova. And then we have the Torska area where there's been a bit of activity north of that salient over the last week or so, but nothing to report today from my mapping sources. If we come down a little further, we get to Berestova here, which is somewhere where the Russians have made some gains. Indeed, Syriac Maps says of this area, Russian army took full control over the high area west of Berestova, thus increasing the buffer zone around this town. So again, always take any source with a pinch of salt, but Syriac Maps is, as I've said a million times, very pro-Russian and will laud Russian advance if there's only even been like one human being with a foot in that area, and they will say that's under Russian control. But to be fair, the Russians really are kind of pushing in most places on the front line at the moment. We are in a Russian counteroffensive period. My question is, what is the end goal, the realistic end goal for the Russians? So you could argue it's political. They need to have some success. So you could look at Avdiivka and say, right, they want to take that so that Putin's got something to campaign on. You could argue the same about Kupiansk or anywhere along the front line. But is that the best thing for them to do given their ultimate goal? And then the question is, well, what is their ultimate goal? Yes, you could say it's the whole of Ukraine, but that's unrealistic. So when it comes to an operational understanding of what's going on around here, what is their ultimate goal? Like, what are the commanders wanting to do here? You can talk about, we want all the area up to the Oskil River, but how long is it taking them to take Bakhmut? So that's, you can argue that, but that's not realistic. So realistically, what are they trying to do here? What are they trying to do around Bakhmut? Do they have a realistic intention of taking all of these towns behind Bakhmut, the Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Druzhkivka, Konstantinivka, Crescent? I just don't know. What are your thoughts about what the Russians are actually trying to do?
Yeah, so, right. As far as the logic, when we're talking about the logic, when we say what are they thinking, I think there is no they. I think that there's Putin and the commands just come down from him and no one else thinks about it. They just obey. That's pretty much, maybe some of the generals who are confident that they're not going to get thrown out a window for whatever reason might pipe up and slightly alter the plans that the Dark Lord has, but ultimately, he says they have to go to the blue lines. And so they're going to go to the blue lines, and they're just going to keep pounding and pounding away. And for right now, until the United States and the EU, Orsis just said they're using phosphorus on him right now. He's getting pounded.
So best of luck to you, matey. In all honesty, it's so difficult. Sorry, it's really hard when you're doing a video and someone says, I'm being hit with phosphorus right now. It's like I don't quite know how to deal with it. So I'll just go on talk about maps.
Well, we're gonna get down there because he is in Krashinka, so we're working our way down. Krashivka.
Klishivka, So it's quite difficult to work out like what the Russians are really trying, and your thesis there is that it's quite disjointed and there's maybe no central plan for what to do, and it might be like localized units trying to do localized things and attacking here and attacking there without any overall plan. I don't know.
I mean, it's centralized in the sense that there's one guy at the top and he sends down the commands. And there's no communication between groups that might be right next to each other. It's all very, top-down, vertical, hierarchical. But, where there's a whip, there's a way, as they say.
So we have some gains for the Russians, as according to Surrey maps, in the Berestova area. And as we can see, they've had previous gains up that railway track going north towards Seversk up there. And that's just around this Bilahorivka, the one that's further south from the previous Bilahorivka, because, you know, Ukraine. Bilahorivka. And then we move along part of Vasile to the Saku-Ventseti, small village here on the meandering river, both the Bakhmutivka River and also the Vasyukivka River there, where the Russians are having some further successes according to Syriac maps again. The Russian army continues advancing north of Saku-Ventseti, taking control over new positions on the northern shore of the Vasyukivka River. So again, further success for the Russians, as according to that source.
And it looks like they're going for high ground there too.
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
So let's have a look. See the topography here. We have
a little slightly higher, maybe. Yeah. Yep. Sure enough.
So it's a little bit. I mean, if you come down here to look across to Soledar, I mean, this from Rozdalivka, which is this way, is definitely sort of higher ground going there and overlooking Bakhmut. And this is where I was hoping, this high part here, I was hoping that Ukraine could take. You're probably a bit out of it now without knowing what I'm really looking at. But if I set that back to north-south. So this is the idea that Soledar, this area where there's a trench line, basically, this is high ground here. So if you look on the bottom right hand of the screen, you've got the height. So that's about 160 meters there. And it goes sort of downhill 140, 130. And then from there, it goes sort of downhill as well, 100 to 100 meters. So this is your ridge along here. The Ukrainians were looking good for going up that way at the very beginning of counteroffensive, and then it kind of stopped. I believe Andrew Perpetua saying that they had troops moved away from there, possibly down to Robotina, and that kind of stopped. And now the Russians, or since then, the Russians have pushed back to the point where they may be in control right across here, as Surrey Maps has said. Andrew Perpetua was unsure of that. He said that might have been the case since June, July. There's just no evidence that he's seen in months coming out of there. But yeah, so this is a difficult area, and the Russians are pushing. It is quite undulating though, and there is lots of topography to consider. There are rivers and you know, bits and pieces. So yeah, that might define how the Russians progress from there. The question that I have is, you know, how much do the Ukrainians want to defend any one given area, given one of their metrics of success is going to be saving their own soldiers? There's no point in them committing soldiers that they effectively will need for a future counteroffensive, and given the troubles they're having with mobilization. So one of their main objectives is surely going to be saving lives, which is, again, exactly what that article in the Bild was saying. As we come on down here, we come to the north of Bakhmut, where the Russians have some gains around Kromova again, and this is just now to the south of that dirt track, which apparently, according to some sources, has been taken by the Russians, but it might not have been. We'll see. But the Russians having success there. And then coming on further to south, Andrew Perpetua having some success for the Russians around the area to the north of the trench networks, which themselves are kind of north or northwest of Klishchivka. This is between an area that the Ukrainians have given up over the last week. The Russians have taken this area, moved forward, but it has come at quite a cost. They've lost a lot of troops and equipment in that area. There's some footage that's been released to corroborate that, but the Russians are generally having success around the Bakhmut area, both north and south. Although I have to say, around Avdiivka, Kurdimivka, it seems to have stabilized since the Russians were looking at pushing back. Do you have anything to say about Bakhmut?
Yeah. Okay. So two things. All right. There's a conversation going on about warthog defense that we need to address that at some point in the show, I think, because it is really important.
Talk about that later.
Second, you know, just my personal feeling, if there was one place, I know Bakhmut, but if there was one place that Ukraine could take back that would really, really make a difference in this part of the front, I believe it would be Soledar. When they lost Soledar, I was just like, oh my God, I knew what was going to happen, and because of the mines, because of the tunnels, because of the defensibility, I was a little bit shocked when it happened, to be honest with you. Huge, massive, old, very old museum quality caches of weapons down there in those mines and tunnels. But
I believe there was a shortage. Now, I may be wrong here, but I think a shortage of like mortar ammunition. I think a shortage of certain things, as well as I do remember that their comms were cut between units, so there was a lack of communication between units, and that didn't help. And so they lost Vuhledar a lot quicker. At the end, a lot quicker than was anticipated. So
it was a real blow, and you know, Vuhledar is what led to the fall of Bakhmut ultimately. And so now the other thing. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, well, Andrew Perpetua talks quite often about how this whole area, had Ukraine had the levels of artillery that they had, artillery and ammunition that they had in the counteroffensive, Bakhmut might well have been a very different place. I mean, this is when the Russians were absolutely pummeling everywhere with artillery, the Ukrainians were having to cede all this territory. But if the Ukrainians had had the artillery pieces they have now, and they had like limitless artillery themselves, ammunition themselves, and had they had the counter battery fire and the drones that they now have, things would have been different. It was a case of they were on the back foot and they just didn't have the equipment that they needed to defend that adequately. But carry on.
Oh yeah, and then the other thing I just wanted to say, Ors is, if you're still watching, I don't know, or tell your buddies, watch your flanks, because this is what they do. So while we've been talking, Orsis, who's in our chat, has been saying, they were just using artillery on our position there, and I think he's still in the Klashivka area, using artillery. Then they come in with the phosphorus to light the area up so that their troops can march in, and that's they repeat this and repeat this and repeat this, and they send in the meat waves, but they almost always have, coming from one flank or another flank, they always have some sort of a VDV type, more experienced unit coming in from the right or the left to try and take a position, to try and take a trench, something like that. So you need to have, most of your unit needs to be facing the oncoming attack coming through the trench, but your most experienced guys in your unit need to be watching the flanks hopefully with night vision, because it's dark here. That's why they just sent off the it's the beginning of the night. It's going to be a nighttime attack. Obviously, most of the Russian troops don't have night vision. That's why they just use the white phosphorus, and they'll probably it's going to be wave after wave all night long. Try to get some sleep, Orsis, when you can.
Yeah, so it reminds me of the talk around when Bakhmut kind of was under a lot of pressure, and the Ukrainians were seeing wave and wave of penal Storm Z units being used by Wagner, but that was giving a false impression of what was going on, because there were some very well drilled, well trained Wagner, like the core Wagner, who would let the meat waves do their stuff, and then they'd be able to kick in and I guess get the win if you like for Wagner. So anyway, that's what's going on in Bakhmut. Just to give a big shout out, thanks to supporters. Thank you so much for all your work and effort, says Pieter van der Riet. Thank you so much. It's incredibly generous of you. And insanely generous as well, John Panciotti. Thank you, Jonathan. Happy holidays from Puerto Rico. Yeah, happy holidays, everyone. Merry Christmas. Happy Hanukkah, or whatever you guys may I guess celebrate, have fun and enjoy this festive period. But I guess we always have to remember as well, sadly, that literally as we're speaking, people are under immense pressure in Ukraine, along the front lines of Ukraine.
Literally right there on the screen.
Yeah, indeed. But thank you so much to John and Peter there, and Brian as well, and I'll get to the others soon. So we'll come down to Avdiivka, where it's sometimes I think it's stabilized. You hear claims that it's stabilized there and it's not too much pressure, and then the next day loads of pins on the map. So I don't know, but my sense is that it's stabilized somewhat in the southern area near Vodiane and Opitny. It's quite difficult here because it's so flat going northwards towards Siverny and Tonyenka that you just get absolutely hammered. As long as the Ukrainians have enough artillery ammunition and drones to cause the Russians issue, then the Russians are going to struggle to move forwards, particularly there. Now, it's a different kettle of fish in these other places where you've got bigger tree lines and the railway there. Then you've got these large buildings. You've got Terrakon. The Russians have taken advantage of there being a town here next to the railway line, Stepova, and used that to kind of launch their attack through there and then spreading it sideways, so north and south of there. But the coke plant is still holding out. There's no news of the Russians getting a foothold in the coke plants, and the area around here, the water treatment plant there, seems to be a bit quiet at the moment. It's a little bit more worrying, it seems, down in the south near the industrial zone, where there's a kind of, I don't know if that's some kind of quarry thing going on there, but there's this street, the Kolosova, is it Kolosova?
Mm-hmm.
So Kolosova Street here, this one is where the Surrey Maps has claimed that the Russians have now got a foothold, although that's not been confirmed there. Surrey Maps then showing there's an increased territory taken by the Russians a little bit north of that. Andrew Perpetua a bit more conservative, and a deep state map somewhere in the middle. But it's tough around here, and it gets slightly worrying because any further north from here, or indeed west from here, and you really are into Avdiivka. So the Russians are having some success there, and that is, I think, a real challenge for the Ukrainians. As much as I said previously, as soon as the Russians get into the coke plant, it's kind of game over. Well, actually, the Ukrainians have stopped the Russians from getting into there, and they've done a really good job of that. Or the coke plant itself, it doesn't really help the Russians at all. It's a pretty formidable defensive structure, I guess. But down here, it's a different kettle of fish, and so the Russians are having more success there. What are your thoughts in general about Avdiivka?
Yeah, well, we're going to see, given the situation with the lack of funding coming from the West, or the lack of guaranteed funding, even if they have the equipment to, let's say, attack, I'm talking about the Ukrainians right now, they can't because they don't know if they're going to get any more. They don't know what's going to come in a month. I'm hearing reports that Ukraine has enough to get them through till February. Okay, well, how do you plan militarily for that? So I think we're just going to see, until this changes, until our political situation in America and in the EU changes to loosen up the purse strings, we're going to continue to see this slow, and the Ukrainians are just trying to hold back. And if we zoom in right back where you were, right where you said the actual city starts. Okay, yeah, they've gotten kind of the first suburban street. If you look at that area with the houses, it's surrounding kind of a forested, and you've got all these forested areas there. I mean, to the upper left-hand corner of your screen, right up in here, and in between those houses, there's all this like semi-forest and yard. And it's going to be not just house to house fighting, tree to tree fighting.
I do believe there's quite a lot of fortifications inside this area.
Yeah.
So this was touted as being quite difficult for the Russians to take. And actually, what they've done is they've gone through the industrial zone instead, and that doesn't surprise me. And actually, that seems to be their way into the city, the main part of the city.
They're trying to. This is the classic Soviet idea of you build a cauldron. They're trying to build a cauldron, an artillery cauldron, and they're just going to level this city. Ultimately, they want to move in to where they can, and then they'll just move in on the rubble. That's their goal, and the
sort of thing that happened in Popasna, that happened previously, and kind of what they did with Bakhmut.
Wash, rinse, repeat.
Yeah. So you reduce it to rubble. The god of war is artillery. Reduce it to rubble. Stick your flag in. Whereas, NATO doctrine is somewhat different, or if you're going to do that, you reduce it to rubble in the air first, from the air first. So, yes, Avdiivka is certainly difficult for the Ukrainians at the moment. We'll have a look at some of the sources here. And thank you to the lively live chat. Really appreciate you all on board here. Thanks to Den Dyer, who says, have you seen news that the Walkhard defense has been deleted by YouTube? We will talk about that after we do the mapping update.
We will.
Really appreciate it. A few people have reached out to me about that. And thanks to Richard Bennett, who's gifted 5 ATP geopolitics memberships. Really appreciate that, Richard. Very, very generous of you. So thanks to everyone there in the live chat. Right, now we have staying in Avdiivka, the north of Avdiivka, before we come to the south to Marinka and Novomykhailivka. Military Lab here says Russian casualties are piling up in the Stepovo chemical plant line. Hundreds of corpses of fallen Russian soldiers just scattered around in the snow-covered ground, unable to break the Ukrainian defenses in this direction. It seems that the Russian command is shifting the focus northwest of Stepovo. It seems that they have finally realized that the Berdichi is much more important settlement, and I would even say that the key to encircling Avdiivka. So attempts to push the front line towards the village, bypassing Stepovo from the north, have already begun. Ukrainians continue to put up a very fierce resistance, so the cost of every meter of advance would surely be very high for the Russians. And this is to say that there is lots of video evidence to say that the Russians have had taken huge losses around here, and we know that. We know that the geolocation of now Tatargami says at least 211 bits of equipment have been shown to be destroyed, and that's not including things that have been so fundamentally blown up they basically don't exist anymore. They're just scorched craters. They're not including them, not including ones that, there will be ones that have been badly damaged but recovered, ones that they've missed. So you can assume that there's going to be at least, I would posit a guess of something like 300 bits of kit lost around Avdiivka. Now, if that's a British army, we'd have no army left, right? That's the end of our mechanized, we'd be combat ineffective. So it just goes to show how much equipment the Russians have. The question is, how much can they draw from their stocks back in Russia? And actually someone did, I didn't share it with you this morning, but there was another satellite analysis of counting up some of the what were they? I think they were infantry fighting vehicles, and a lot of them didn't have turrets. They're basically, although there are hundreds left, they're cannibalized. And the question is, how many bits of kit can they still throw at the front line? And I guess we'll have to wait to see. So the idea of Military Lab here is that they're going to attack, or they're having more success attacking from this northern area here. They have made some gains over the last few days towards Berdichi for this overall encirclement. If they can get around here, then getting through that neck of the cauldron into this sack becomes even more difficult. They might not close the neck, but if they make the neck longer, then this main supply route becomes much more treacherous.
Exactly. If they go to Berdichi, it just means that there's a longer way. It reduces the number of roads going in to Avdiivka.
Yeah. Exactly, because this one coming down here will be interdicted and so on and so forth. So it's difficult there. Then as we come on, Surat Mat. So this is what Surat Mat said about the industrial area. The Russian army made new advances west of the Promka industrial area. The clashes with the Ukrainian army are taking place in the Lamontovo and Kolosova streets, which I talked about. Situation is unknown there. I mean, I can't talk to the accuracy of Surat Mat's claims there, but it could well be that the Russians are indeed fighting there. And then we're going to come down to Marinka now, which you've heard me say plenty of times this week. It is super important, Marinka, or at least I'd say Pobjeda is almost more important than Marinka, because it's about this road. If they can take Novomykhailivka, they can cut off this logistics road here and basically have the front line along the length of this road here. And that will then get them the ability to take Vuhledar from the northeast rather than trying to go uphill from Pavlivka. That then becomes easier to take Vuhledar. And if they take Vuhledar, then the Ukrainians are then suddenly unable to use HIMARS to take out the edge of Mariupol and these roads and logistical targets along there. So it is important, and it's all kind of like dominoes. You don't want to start. You don't want to start the row of dominoes falling. And it kind of starts with Marinka, I guess, and the Russians are having success here, and they are moving along the roads towards Avdiivka. Andrew Perpetua's live stream last night did talk about, there was a claim, and he said it comes from someone who's usually a doom poster for the Ukrainians. It's usually all doom and gloom. But he said that actually he was really upbeat, that there was an attack towards Avdiivka and they basically destroyed everything. So there's a Russian attack, but he's like, I can't work out, like, this is something to pay attention to, because he normally wouldn't say something like this. So that gives it credence, but I can't work out how this area could be attacked. Like, where's that attack coming from? Unless it's one of the classics of in the direction of, which means it could just be back here. But if that is true, then, you know, the Russians have taken some big losses around here again. But, you know, we'll see if anything comes out in the
I'm sure they're just coming right up that road, and it's just, that's a beautiful little killing zone there for the Ukrainians to take out Russians. You know, they got the water on one side and big open fields on the other side. And I'm sure the Russians will probably see videos coming out in a few days or weeks or something of this road right here, of just tank after tank after Ural truck after Ural truck, you know?
Yeah. Well, hopefully, yeah. And then Surat Maps has some success for the Ukrainians north of the water, which is a little bit of a worry, because actually that's where the Ukrainians have been able to hold out the most. They lost this southern area. That seems to be pretty much agreed upon now, as the Ukrainians are being pushed back along this water feature back to the very edge of technically Marinka. So yes, Surat Maps here saying that situation west of Donetsk in Marinka, that the Russians have reached a junction of Parychoy Komuni Ivano-Franka, very close to the western edge of Marinka town. And then, of course, you know, Novomykolivka is not far away from the news again. Before we get there, actually, Pobjeda, I've talked about this last couple of days, how just as an agricultural settlement, that is hugely important, really, for sitting on this road and for stopping Marinka becoming encircled, which it did really well. However, they've gone basically through Marinka now. It did take an awful lot of time, but the Pobjeda is under quite a lot of pressure from the north and from the east as well.
I just want to emphasize, you know, just to zoom out, if we can just zoom out on the map a little bit of this area here. If there's one area that has to hold, absolutely must hold on this front line over this winter crunch time, it's this area between Vuhledar and Marinka. It's like the most critical part of this map. Really?
Yeah, so that's what I was just talking about, is basically the Russians would want to have that, really. They'd want to have that to protect Mariupol, but it also stops an awful lot of other stuff. You've got places like the railway, if I get rid of that now, you've got the railway at Volnovakha. They're like a buffer zone on that, so that doesn't get hit. There's all sorts of logistics, and so pushing that back, I mean, that's what Andrew Perpetua says as well, that really Novomykolivka is kind of crucial. And he was saying that actually this has been one of Russia's main objectives for a long time. It's just been drowned out by lots of activity in Bakhmut and Avdiivka, but actually they've been keen on taking this for a very long time, because that gets them Konstantinivka and then all the things I talked about before. So yeah, you get agreement with me there. So that's Novomykolivka. Surat Map saying that Russian army made new advances south of there. As you can see, the grey zone is really, well, the town is almost a grey zone now. I mean, they're on the outskirts of Novomykolivka, really, and you're going to see fighting on the streets there, I'm pretty sure, at some point soon. And again, that is a challenge for Ukraine. Although I say, you know, don't worry too much about conceding territory, you still don't want Ukraine to concede territory. You still don't want them to lose these key places like Novomykolivka. So it's not great, but it's not the end of the world. I mean, what's frustrating is you talk about, well, that's a key because you don't want Vuhledar to fall, because then they can't fire HIMARS at Mariupol. Yeah, but if you give them 300-kilometer HIMARS, ATACMS rockets, it's not a problem. That ain't a problem. And in fact, there are some rumors that unitary warhead ATACMS are on the way. I can't talk to the provenance of these rumors and to the accuracy of them, but there are certain people that say, don't worry, ATACMS are on the way. Don't worry, X, Y, and Z. So who knows?
Okay, I mean, but it's like, I hear a lot of talk about a lot of things, and I hear them talking to plan about a talk too. But until it's on the ground, don't count your chickens.
Yes. Absolutely, 100%. And as we move to the west, we pass Velika Novosilka and Robotina. No change there. We have, again, sorry to mention Andrew, but he talks about this in very negative terms, in like he still doesn't understand why. And I always said this as well. I don't know why they chose Robotina as the place to attack, because it is the single strongest defensively, the strongest defended area on the whole of the front line, literally from north to south. This has the biggest density of defensive fortifications and trenches and minefields. So it was a bit of an, I'm sure it'll all come out in a wash as to why they chose there. It's all going to be about Tokmak, isn't it? But you're thinking the Russians knew that Tokmak would be a primary objective, so they defended that the greatest. So the Ukrainians still went against that rather than seeing if there was any other way around it. I don't know. I don't know enough of the information, and I have to trust the armed forces of Ukraine for having a lot more information than me and making better decisions. But it seems like that was a difficult one.
By the way, Jonathan, can you share the link to this live stream? Because it looks like some people are asking, hey, can we share the link to this live stream more? And I actually just realized you sent me a link to this, but I don't have a link I can send out to my subscribers to come into this live stream.
Of course, I'll put that in. I'll put that out there for those. Okay. I mean, it's there. Go and share it, everyone. Go and share the link far and wide.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
So Robotina, is a bit controversial. Unfortunately for the Ukrainians, they were making some slow headway, but that seems to be reversed now in terms of what's going on near Kopani and north of Novoprokopivka. I would expect that this whole salient maybe to be lost in the Russians' push over the winter. I don't know that it will have that huge an effect on the whole outcome of the war, because that has no strategic value in and of itself or operational value. Given that was land that was Russian up until recently. So, it's not like this is a logistic thoroughfare or anything like that. So, losing this area back to the Russians may be something that the Ukrainians will be willing to take going forward. And then coming to Krinky, really no news coming out of Krinky. I mean, there's been a lot of activity there. There's a lot of video footage of lost Russian equipment there. It's very costly for the Russians, but no doubt costly for the Ukrainians as well. And one must hope from a pro-Ukrainian point of view that the Ukrainians are exacting a greater toll on the Russians at a much more preferable ratio than the Russians would hope. So that's pretty much that. It's mainly happening on the east at the moment. Any news from people near the front line, James, or on the front line?
Yeah, I've been talking with. I mean, I don't want to be Andrew Perpetua here. You know how he is. He's Mr. Depression.
You've muted yourself. I don't know how that happened. You are muted. Oh, I don't know what's happened there. Oh, that looked like he was getting to the key. Oh, there you're back. You're back.
Woo! I bumped something with my mouse like an idiot. Okay. So, I don't want to be like, how Andrew Perpetua is. He's always like, oh, everything's so sad and depressing. I mean, I know he doesn't necessarily mean it that way, but people tease him about it. But I don't want to be that guy. But I think that all of us collectively, you were just talking about, the problems, like why did they attack in this one area in Robotina? Ukraine and all of us who are supporting Ukraine are going to have to come to terms on some level with the fact that the Ukrainian army wasn't necessarily ready for this war.
Yeah.
And in particular, their officer corps is going to have to go through some changes. And I think that, Reznikov was great. He did a great work, but I think Umarov is hopefully going to bring some of those changes. But the changes need to go all the way down to the bottom, to the base of the officer corps. And I'm saying this because the things I'm hearing back from my friends who are out there and have been out there on the front lines is that basically the Ukrainian, not all of the Ukrainian officers by any sense, okay, but a large percentage of the Ukrainian officers have problems. They are corrupt or inept or don't have proper training, don't have any idea what they're doing, aren't communicating, and are basically sending our guys, I'm talking about, foreign fighters who are the ones communicating to me, sending them out to missions that are improperly researched, no planning whatsoever. Now, it's not every time. It's not all of them, obviously, but it's a high enough of a percentage that I'm getting this feedback almost constantly. And I have been since April or May of last year. Okay, I've spoken to hundreds of soldiers, not just foreign fighters, but Ukrainians as well. And it's a real problem. The thing about corruption, I've been studying a lot about how corruption works in Ukraine, particularly in the military. And the thing to understand is that the stuff that we are sending to Ukraine, that the government, our governments are sending to Ukraine, that is definitely getting to Ukraine and it's being kept track of. Okay. There's a lot of things, however, that are coming from charities or funding like mine. Like I have a web page connected to my site. I don't know if you can get to it for you, but Americans can get to it, where I'm raising money for things like bulletproof vests and tourniquets, and people are raising money for drones. Yeah. So the name of my site, it's yeah, there you go. Boom. Okay. And in fact, if anybody wants to, we're doing a thing. So we raised enough money for Tony to get back to Ukraine. If you want to donate to that to help his travel costs right now, I have the first tourniquet that has been successfully ordered. Okay, and it's going to go to the Legion. So it's like the first test of this webpage. Is it going to work? Is it going to do what we want it to do? So if anybody wants to buy a tourniquet for a soldier, that's probably the best, cheapest thing that you can buy. But I'm also hearing from my fellow soldiers that they get stuff, and I'm talking about stuff from charities. Then they have to take they take a picture with it that says, "Thank you for giving us this," and then they never see that item again. And the Ukrainian officer commander takes it, and they never see it again. And just recently, within the past few months, a particular unit with a bunch of my friends, 3 were killed in an artillery barrage that, due to poor communication, might have been, we're not sure if it was the Russians or the Ukrainians. We don't know for certain. But one of the things that happened is that the Ukrainian commander's safe house was hit. And when it was hit, they found that in one of the back rooms, he was hoarding a bunch of drones that he had gotten from somewhere. And the unit was like, "Hey, we needed those drones. We needed them a long time ago." Orsis is giving me the sad face.
Yeah, so Orsus is saying, just on that note, I mean, this is why it's good to go with people like Constantine and people who are tried and tested. If you find people that do that good fundraising that gets to the people that need it, and then use Constantine, then gives you video footage from the drones that were actually fundraised for. That's really super important,
massively important.
Yeah, also says that the train line has been lost, that the Russians have forced the Ukrainians back 300 meters. He said that's bad news. The good news is that they took out a couple of tanks, some APVs, 2 tanks, 3 APCs, and probably 15 troops were taken out. So this is what I talk about, that if you are going to cede territory to the Russians, make sure it's worthwhile, and that's kind of talking to that, which is they lose equipment in taking territory, which means that when it comes to the Ukrainians counter offensive, and that might be like 4 or 5 months away, if there's this consistent attrition of the Russians in attacking, then it ends up being effectively a Pyrrhic victory. So in Avdiivka, if they take Avdiivka at the expense of like 500 bits of equipment and, I don't know, 15,000 troops, and you think, well done, you've won that. But as what happens with what happened with Pyrrhus in the ancient Greek times, is you effectively culminate, you exhaust yourself, you are in a weaker position, and then you are basically susceptible to lose in the long run. And that would be the hope for the Ukrainians, that all the territory they cede over the winter period, it leaves them in a better place to take back even more when it comes back to their counteroffensive.
Well, Orsus, he's literally reporting on the results of the attack while I was ranting. Yeah, wow. And he says 5 men. I'm so sorry.
Orsus, and I assume, no offense, I obviously don't know Orsus, and I assume that what he's saying is correct, and he is who he is and is where he is. But I just have to say that, I am taking that on face value there, Orsus. But thank you anyway, for giving us that information. So there was that is. Where were we? Because you were going to talk about...
I was just talking about the charities and things. We just need to have better accounting. And what I've been talking about, potential corruption, is not necessarily that. It may be just poor logistics, inexperienced army officers. I mean, there's all sorts of potential problems. Don't ever blame on malice what could be blamed on stupidity or ineptitude. But these are things that,
I think, is that Hanlon's razor. Yeah.
But I mean, I'm still joining the army. I'm still gonna join the Legion for knowing this, and some of my friends, Hanlon's razor, yes. I mean, knowing that these problems exist, and we still should support Ukraine. It's one big reason why, oh my gosh, the Republicans thing about, there's no accountability, blah, blah, blah. That's absolutely not true. There's a ton of accountability for the stuff that's coming in from the United States federal government, from NATO. But the items that are coming from charities, and fundraisers like mine are sometimes not accounted for properly. They do stay in Ukraine. They absolutely stay in Ukraine. Nobody, hey. Who's saying that? Who's spouting Russian propaganda?
Well, yeah, don't worry about that.
All right. So the thing is this stuff does stay in Ukraine, but sometimes some commanders, it looks like what they're doing is they may be selling it to other units. Okay, and this is why there's like some units have a lot of equipment, and other units have like no equipment, and everybody's like, why is this happening? And so these are things that need to get resolved.
Yeah,
at the lower levels within the Ukrainian army, and I believe that they will be. I think that they can be resolved, but it needs to happen.
Yeah, I've just put someone in a timeout, but I think I've accidentally put Darren. It was all flicking, and I've accidentally put Darren in a timeout as well. So you might not be able to comment, Darren, but it was a mistake, and it'll all get sorted out. Don't worry. Oops. So yeah, there was also something else before in the green room before we came on. Oh, that's it. We're going to talk about, and it came up here with Warthog Defense. So do you want to explain who Warthog Defense are and what's going on, because they've been taken off YouTube? So this might be a good time to talk about that.
Yeah, Warthog Defense has been around since early in the war. They're a great source of just pretty much raw video with a little bit of commentary. Now, the guy doesn't show his face, but I think he's from the EU, maybe Estonian or Polish or something like that. And he's been interviewed by various other news organizations, but really, very reliable information. And I was looking for, he has a Facebook channel, the Warthog Defense Facebook channel, a Facebook group. And I think he has a Facebook page. I was looking for it because I heard that he had an explanation of what happened. And it looks as though he got taken down by no, that's not, Ozzy, I heard an interview with him, and his accent is not Middle Eastern, I can tell you that. And I believe he mentioned in the interview that he was, I'm going to say like Estonian or Lithuanian. Maybe it's Lithuanian. But what this is what I believe is happening is the troll farms, in St. Petersburg or India, wherever they are the Russian troll farms are doing DDoS or distributed denial of service attacks on pro-Ukraine YouTubers, and the way that they're doing it, I believe, is by reporting and launching complaints on YouTube. So they just complain, and if a channel gets a certain number of complaints, I don't know what the threshold is, but a certain number of complaints within a certain time frame. Yeah, exactly. Den just said Russian trolls repeatedly flagged his content, and then what happens is the AI just kicks in and just cuts it off, and if it keeps on happening, they'll just cut off the channel completely, and then maybe after 3 days or 2 weeks, a human being will come and look at it and maybe let them.
So this happened to me to some degree, and I was suspended for a week for misinformation. And this was back last year. And I got given a strike for misinformation, and then I had a warning. A warning, then a strike. And that first strike meant I was banned for a week, and that was hugely problematic. And what really annoyed me, really genuinely upset me a lot, because I campaign against misinformation and disinformation. I'm like a philosopher who talks about like epistemology and truth and blah blah blah, and like here I was being accused of misinformation. I was like, you need to tell me what YouTube need to tell me what I have misinformed the public about. You've told me what the video is, and you said all these 20 things that misinformation could be, right? And you said this video, that. But that's a 45-minute video that has
point
all
is,
this different stuff. And
they don't know.
No,
they don't know, because it was triggered by AI.
Yeah,
it was, so a real human comes and looks at it and says, oh, the AI says it. Oh, I must agree. And that's all.
Or they say, so when you appeal it, then it goes to human, but then they don't give you the information. So they didn't tell me, they couldn't tell me what part of the video it was. So I couldn't defend it. So that basically, imagine the analogy is in court. You're brought up in court. You say, you, James, you're in court for doing something bad. And here's a list of 20 bad things you could have done. And you did it on this day. You're like, yeah, okay, I'm in court. How can I defend myself? You're not telling me when I did it exactly and what it is I did wrong. Yeah, but we've checked it. You definitely did it. And our
AI checked it.
Yeah. Well, no, but then you've appealed it, even though you don't know what it is. You've appealed it, and a human has checked it, and they said, yeah, you've definitely done that. But we're not going to tell you what it is, and we're not going to tell you exactly when it happened. So you can't defend it. But then we're going to take your income away from a week, right? So you're left going, so I was saying to these real live people on the help thing, and I had great support from my team, and it was so lovely. But you know, I was saying, would you like it if you had your income taken away for like and you have to pay a mortgage, right? And you have your income taken away, and you're not told why you did it and what you did and when you did it. Like, how would you feel if you couldn't defend yourself? And he's like, and basically the system is not fit for purpose, and it was gamed. And that was the first time I was gamed, because I think that was, again, reports from Russian sources. And then it was a case of being hit in lots of ways, so that being reported in lots of ways, so that my channel was flagged up. And I think this is probably what happened with Warthog. So when your channel gets flagged up more and more, then it gets looked at with a fine-tooth comb. So when you talk, so with channels like Warthog particularly, you are showing things with explosions on, and you're showing things of war. Now, YouTube don't like that, right? But most of the time, if a channel, so say you went to Mr. Beast, right, and he did it, he did randomly, he did a video of what that was identical to what Warthog uploaded. Right, Mr. Beast wouldn't be flagged because they're not looking at his channel for those things with a fine-tooth comb. But Warthog Defense is being looked at, so he uploads the same thing and it gets taken down because that channel has been flagged so many times by the troll army, by the Russian troll army, that it gets looked at, and anything that is even remotely close to invalidating the content means it gets taken down, and it is basically gaming the system.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly what they're doing. And this is a huge reason why we have to band together as YouTubers, as viewers. One of the big things on my channel that I'm trying to do is I have a YouTube membership, but my goal is not to create just a membership for my channel. My goal is to create a membership of everyone who supports Ukraine. I'm calling it the International Legion Auxiliary Corps, for lack of a better term. And the point of this is not to support a YouTube channel. The point of this is to support all YouTube channels that support Ukraine, to support Ukraine in general, but online in particular. So if Artur Rahe gets taken down this way, we all jump on him. NAFO is very similar. It's along the same sort of a line. I just want something a little more organized.
Yeah, interesting.
Somebody was asking.
Yeah, so John Larkin said, could James explain why trolls say, well, the black and red flag is Nazi when obviously James is not? And well, you could probably explain this better than I was going to.
Of course. I love talking about this. Obviously not. Half my family's black, just so you know. The better half, I would say. Thank you, John. Thanks. Yeah, it is. I actually did 10 sets of 5 half pull-ups in the pool, like a therapy pool today. Anyway, all right, enough of that. So this red and black flag is the other national flag of Ukraine. The yellow and blue and the red and black were used going all the way back to the early Middle Ages. Okay? Way before the Nazis. Has 0% to do with the Nazis. It was co-opted by the Nazis in World War II. But even during the now, if I could call myself any political persuasion, I would call myself an anarchist. But I don't, so I won't. Maybe I'm a wannabe, right? But the point is, this flag was used. Oh, wait, my finger's pointing the wrong direction. This flag was used by the Makhnovitsi, by the Black Brigades, the Makhno Battalion, the only functioning anarchist state that has ever existed, which was in Ukraine in the 1920s and was wiped out by the socialists. Well, mostly. A very complex history there. But so that for me, that's what it represents. Now, I have had people tell me, it represents blood and soil, the Nazi slogan. No, it doesn't. Okay, I've even had Ukrainians tell me that. Okay, so even Ukrainians believe that propaganda, some of them. Okay, it was co-opted by the Nazis in the late 1930s early 1940s, when they also co-opted the Ukrainian independence movement that was fighting against the Soviets. They ended up taking the leader, Stepan Bandera, and throwing him in jail for the duration of World War II. And all of the Nazi accusations that they make against the Banderites, he was imprisoned by the Nazis when his organization was taken over by the Nazis from the outside, and they started 25% of the UPA, Ukrainian independence movement, was Jewish before the Nazis came in. So don't even tell me about that. Now, one thing I do is I hang my flag vertically, specifically to avoid the it's a Nazi flag question. But I would prefer it to be black on top, symbolizing anarchism over socialism, because I'm like an anarcho-socialist, right? But I know for a fact that the Makhno flag was either black or black and red, and the red was usually on top. So
I did a video way back when on Bandera Rudnitska, who is another interesting name to consider. Nazis and nuance. So if you want to go and check that out, I'll put that in the live stream just in case anyone is indeed interested in looking at that. Just a bit of history and, as I say, nuance. It's important to get nuance. I mean, these things, people are complicated, right? And people like Stepan Bandera might have great views in one area, but terrible views in other areas, right? It's the same with many people in history. We can talk about, you can talk about Elon Musk. You can talk about one of my favorite people to mention. You can talk about Winston Churchill and the famine in the Bengal famine. And his views, what would now be classed as pretty much outright racist views, but also was the hero of Great Britain in World War II. You can talk about here's one Wonka now in the cinemas. So you can talk about Roald Dahl, the author, beloved children's author, also held anti-Semitic views. And so people are complicated and things are difficult, and that kind of nuance is important to understand.
Also, oh my gosh, Timothy Snyder. Almost forgot the name. If you go back and watch his lectures at Yale, he has a really important discussion about the Jewish communities in Ukraine, both the Polish and Russian parts of Ukraine during the Middle Ages and up to and until the World Wars. And the relationship really opened my eyes in terms of the relationships between the Jewish communities and the lower classes and the upper classes of Eastern European society, and how the Jewish communities functioned in that, and how that led to the hatred and pogroms and all of that type of stuff.
And that is free. The Timothy Snyder lectures on YouTube, so you can go and find them there. He's brilliant, Timothy Snyder, no doubt about it. Can I just say thanks for TTT from Tahir from Oslo. Thanks for your job. Really appreciate that, TTT. Thanks so much for your support. This gives me great joy. So a lot of people, by the way, Lawrence, a lot of people were asking after you. He disappeared off the channel for some time, and people were worried about you. So it's great to see you back. Plans are worthless, but planning is everything. Sorry I've been AWOL, but I had a bad accident, several broken ribs. I'm on the mend. Good luck to you, mate. And thank you. Thanks for supporting the channel. And I honestly do hope you are you get well soon, and then gives another 5 memberships. So job. he is a legend in his own underwear, as we like to say. And Guitar Horst, GTER Horst, Guitar Horst, for Christmas. Thank you, mate. I really appreciate that. Sometimes there's one of my great channel supporters is Surprise It's Us as the handle. And it took me like 6 months before I realized it was Surprise It's Us. I thought it's like something like Surprise Sits Us or something like that. I was just like getting it wrong in my head. I was like, oh no, I see those words now. But
I just want to mention 3 things real quickly. First of all, Talking Bloke said, great answer on the flag. I heard a few trolls wince. That's fantastic. Nice. And socialist anarchist, almost antithetical. Yeah. It's funny to say that, but anarcho-socialist is a thing for sure. But also Gitter Horst, I think that's how we pronounce it. He had a question going all the way back to the beginning about was the bomber, the guy with the grenades, was he Ukrainian
Hungarian speaking
or Hungarian? And there was kind of a debate about that. And I want to make mention that this part of Ukraine, when you get up into the mountains, it goes from Hungarian to like real hardcore Ukrainian. And I'm talking about the Hutsuls. Okay, the Hutsuls are like as Ukrainian as Ukrainians can get. Arguably, or sometimes it's pronounced Gutsuls. They were the mountain people living in the Carpathians, and there's a whole bunch of other ethnic groups. I don't ask me the exact territories, but you can go 10 miles, and it goes from 50% Hungarian Ukrainian to 50% Ukrainian, Highlanders, thank you, to 50% Ukrainian Hutsuls. So maybe there's a Hutsul element because they were fighting against the Soviets, and they were fighting against everybody for a long time. So maybe like around Yaremche, that area there, that's like Hutsul land. Kolomia, that's like the beginning of Hutsul territory. Anyway, yeah, tourniquets, man. Pass this on for tourniquets. Yeah, if you guys want to go to my... Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks, John. Pass this on for tourniquets, and of course that's going back to James's YouTube channel, and then on to here, and selecting sort of tourniquets. Hopefully that will prove to be a good way for these guys in the International Legion to get some,
I'm ordering them from Israel, where they're coming from, ironically.
Right. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're going to need some of them themselves, to be fair.
Yeah.
And just as we kind of meander towards some kind of vague conclusion, which I'm notoriously bad at actually finishing these things. War journalist and streamer Dylan Burns, says Borgfeller, and a great
perfect
supporter,
example.
got demonetized by YouTube for 3 months, and they hold outstanding payments, and YouTube won't say what he did wrong. I just don't understand how that can even be allowed. It seems terrible. But thanks so much for this, Borg, and for your membership as well. Really do appreciate
that. This is going back to what I was saying before. This is why we have to band together. We have to create some kind of an association, an organization of people, YouTubers, the YouTube viewership, and people just who don't even watch. Maybe they watch TikTok and they support Ukraine. But we have to band together. We have to start influencing these big tech companies. We have to start influencing our respective governments. All of that stuff. One last thing. There's a big talk here about Orsis is talking about we lack ammo, we ran out of ammo, and people are saying, where's the ammo? What? Okay, so the last mile is always the hardest part of logistics. Okay, that's the deal. So they might have the ammo, but if it's a kilometer or 3 kilometers away, it might as well not be there if they're in the middle of a firefight right now.
Yeah, and this is why we've seen the Russians, for example, this has been evidence in Avdiivka, down in this industrial area. The Russians have been using UGVs, unmanned ground vehicles, drones on tracks, to get ammunition to their troops on the front, literally on the very front of the front line. And we've seen that take place around here. In fact, the UGV got through and did that and was being peppered by different ordnance, but actually survived, and they successfully got that equipment to the front line. It is a real challenge. You're right. In terms of logistics, you can get things only so far before it then becomes very risky to get that to the people who need it the most, to the people firing it. And who wants to go and deliver a very heavy box of ammunition? If these guys are chewing through, I don't know how many rounds a day, like firing off, 1 day's worth of small arms ammunition is a big old heavy box of, well, who's going to carry a heavy box of bullets into a trench under artillery, mortar, and small arms fire? It's a real and drones.
It's a real problem. The last live stream I did with Tony, the guy who's going back to Ukraine to fight, we talked about this, and basically there's a distribution depot, usually within 5 to 7 kilometers of any point on the front line. And then there are also these like stores and little magazines. I'm calling them magazines. They're magazines, right? That are little bodegas that are opening up where a soldier can go in there and buy all the kinds of things that they need. And they're run by private enterprising people. And that's why I was talking when I was talking about the possibility of some corruption between units and commanders selling things that they're getting from charities, and maybe they're putting them in these shops, and so soldiers have to buy the things that they should have gotten for free. But that's not happening with bullets. Okay, that's not happening with bullets or guns. It's just a logistics problem.
So Orsus, who is on the front line in the Klishchiivka area, is talking about help terror, please. Now, Ukraine has a terror unit, and I presume that's what he means by that, but I don't know that they've got, I don't know where to go to actually find the place that can support them, whether there's, a central Twitter handle or whatever, but I'm sure he can let me know in the back channels at some point, and I can shout about that. So there was just something that pertains to the whole Zaluzhny discussion we were having earlier. Zaluzhny explained that he explained it very concisely. Their estimates of how quickly they could advance were ludicrously over-optimistic. If they really could advance that quickly, then why not attack at the place that they needed it the most? So just this will be one of the final things, because I will have to shoot, but
me too.
So this is the idea that they were under the impression, and you can pick this apart completely, but they're under the impression that they would be able to, if they punch through, they will be able to move at 30 kilometers a day. That was what they're expecting around here, and they found out that they wouldn't be able to do that within hours. Literally, the Malatok Machka, loss of a whole bunch of equipment, that all went wrong. The minefields were all there, the fortifications were all there, and they were never going to move at 30 kilometers a day. So that put an end to that.
I think what's gonna come out in the wash, I think we're gonna find out. Wow, thank you, AJ. Thank you so much. I think what we're going to find out when it comes out in the wash in the history books in years from now is that NATO was pushing this, NATO strategies, and they were doing their war gaming and all of that. And they're like, yeah, you got to do it here. This is the best place. And the Ukrainian generals were saying no, and we don't have all the equipment we need either. But, finally, the social pressure just said, okay, let's do it. And they tried it, and it didn't work. And I mean, I'm surprised they got as far as they did, actually, in without the Abrams and without all of the equipment. I hope they try it again in somewhere along, like I think last week, was it last week? The week before. I said I hope they cross the Dnipro River in that area between where the lake is now gone, where the lake is dry. Not Trinky, but that's my that's what I think is going to happen at some point.
As one of the last things to say, JR is here. He's a member. JR is basically broadly responsible for this map, and he's basically a legend. Wow. But in 1,000 years, there'll be songs written about him. Children will be singing to their parents. They'll come back from primary school and say, we heard about JR today. He sounds like an amazing guy.
And I want to be JR when I grow up.
Yeah. We heard about some other JMSP. He was a bit of a loser, but JR is definitely the ledge. So thanks, mate. I really do appreciate everything you do. And Grimsoft on Discord. So you can go and have a chat amongst yourselves on Discord. Please join the Discord server. It's linked. It might not be in my live videos, but it's linked on all of my other descriptions. That's really important. So thanks. Yeah. Mate, just before we go, I'm going to thank everyone again who has contributed so beautifully. Is there anything you wanted to add to the stream before?
Anybody who's contributed on my site, I apologize, I can't look at it in real time, but I'm not gonna do a stream today because I have to spend some kind of time with my wife, and I promised her I would this weekend. But I will be doing a stream tomorrow at 9:30. No, I'm sorry. 12 o'clock Eastern time. Oh my God, I can't talk. 12 o'clock Eastern time, United States time. Okay, so that's 7 o'clock my time is when I'm going to be doing a live stream with the guy that we just raised money for to send him back to Ukraine. So it's going to be a little victory lap. And we had a really great discussion last time about, the ins and outs of fighting and all the things. And with the new information I've been getting from my friends who have just come back from the front, some of it's good, some of it's bad. We're going to talk about those things, and we're going to do it in a real factual manner as people who are pro-Ukraine, who are actually fighting for Ukraine, but recognizing that there are problems and we need to figure out how to resolve them.
Yeah. You can never solve problems you don't admit that they exist in the first place. So, first rule of being an alcoholic is, if you want to cure yourself, you got to admit you got the issue. So thank you very much, James. I really appreciate you doing this with me again, and hopefully people can go to your channel and check you out and the work you're doing. And I'll be throwing those donations your way. I'll speak to you about that in the green room. In the meantime, just a massive thanks to everyone again. So particularly Brian Ivy, Peter van der Reut, John Panciotti. I struggle so often every day with words and letters.
You do pretty good. I'm shocked sometimes at some of these words you rattle off, man.
But and then sometimes when it's like I'm dealing with people from all over the world, and there'll be words and names in you get used
to the Horlivkas and the Krashivkas, and then it's like,
and then it's like now I've got to tell you the Hungarian foreign minister's name, and it's like letters that should never be seen in the same vicinity as each other. Like who puts a J next to a Z and an R? It's like that's not right. Just
wait until Georgia starts entering the EU, and you have to read those names.
It's all right. I can do enough Ashvish Billies. I'm sure that's all it is in Georgian. John Panciotti, thank you. Den Dyer, Richard Bennett, TTT, John Larkin, Lawrence 22, get well soon, dude. Terhorst, G Terhorst, Borgfella, John Larkin, AJ Simo. Really great to have all of you guys and everyone else and all the members on board. Thank you so much, and big thanks to James and Why in Ukraine. Last words to you, dude.
Oh well, just thank you everybody who's come checking out. Please don't have high expectations for my channel, okay? I just learning. I have only started learning how to do all this since the war started. All right. So if you're coming with he's going to be the best, no. Okay, I'm doing what I can. I live here in Ukraine, and I'm doing everything I can to support Ukraine. And I was in the Legion. I got injured in training. I'm going back to the Legion in probably a couple of months.
Which is immense. So, all the very best to you. Well, look, I'm sure we'll speak beforehand, but Merry Christmas, James, and to all the people on my stream. Take care, everybody. All the very best, and toodle pips.
Do побачення.